The reason I liked this was because they had obviously openly spoken about their plans in front of a
Yeah,
16-year-old girl who,
right.
from their perspective, it's like
Couldn't
talking in front of the
possibly
family
understand.
dog. The dog's never
Right.
going to give up the recipe for Bush's baked beans.
Hello and welcome back to The Buck Starts Here, the podcast that usually digs deep into the juicy stories, power plays, and wild twists that shape the presidencies of the United States. My name is Kyle, the Major Benjamin Talmadge to raise Anna Strong, and today we're finally making good on John Adams' promise to Abigail in 1776, though I think he might have mistook her letter for an April Fool's joke, considering it's dated March 31st. So maybe that's why he didn't actually remember anybody.
Remember the
No, I'm going to touch a nerve
ladies.
here. We're remembering the ladies today. It's only 250 years late.
Well, I guess it's never too late to say you're sorry.
Am I doing that for all of us?
I hope so. I don't have the actual quote, but I paraphrase it here. Do not forget the ladies. Treat them better than your ancestors did, or in time you will have another revolution on your hands.
That's about
I like that
right.
there was a threat also attached to it.
Right? They had a pretty good relationship. Apparently the letters are amazing. And I'm trying to get Eric to do a bit with me where we'll read the different parts of some of John Adams's letters.
I think that would be great. I would love
Right?
to. Theatrical reenactment would be fantastic.
Exactly. You could be our Abigail if we need one.
I'll give it my best shot. It will be hard for me.
I don't know that Eric's going to do too well.
Well, at least he'll have the right accent.
Right. God. All right. So revolutionary women, then. Who do we want to start with?
Well, I want to start with the general state of women at the time of the American
really
Revolution. Yeah, there are some issues that I think need to be clarified before we talk about which women we know and why. So, unfortunately, at the time of the revolution, and this will be offensive to modern sensibilities, women were considered by most men to be actually like subhuman.
It's not just women, too. They seem
It's
to
not
think
just women.
several groups.
They pick and choose.
Right?
Like it seems as though they're able to recognize that women and, people from other parts of the world are still people, but they're somehow less people than.
Right.
And this is, when we hear the Declaration of Independence, so all men are created equal, we think of it in this very egalitarian way, humankind. It's man is the general term. Unfortunately, that's not correct. That's placing our modern sensibility on older historic documents. There were debates about whether or not it should just be men. And they said, well, it's men, and it's even not all men, but men is the bare minimum for rights. So women were, they deliberately exclude women. There's a big argument about it. And we, I believe, get our more universal concept of this. I think this is something that Lincoln tries to correct. And even then, he doesn't do a perfect job at it at Gettysburg. Later at Seneca Falls, Elizabeth Cady Stanton rewrites the Declaration and says, all men and women are created equal. So this is a debate that goes on for a long time. And I think that we really need to frame this part of the history of the American Revolution, understanding that women have no rights at all. They can't own land. Widows only inherit a dower of their husbands, so only partial. In some cases, they don't really actually have ownership of the land. They can't make decisions. So in New Jersey, for whatever reason, widows are considered landowners, and they go petitioning for the right to vote. So a lot of localities in New Jersey allow widows to vote. So widows have kind of a special, and we create a lot of widows during the Revolutionary War. Then so more and more widows, more and more women are starting to take over their farms, take over the husbands' businesses, and then they're going to try to claim the pensions of their husbands after the country begins. Now, if there are sons already, the women they'll be like dower mothers. So they'll manage for the son until he's of age. then she loses her property to her
All
son.
of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, the idea there being, if a widow were to remarry, all of her dower, her ownership of her property, which was her former husband's property, now goes to the new husband.
There's been a running theme on here that there's the way to pull yourself up by your bootstraps is to marry into wealth.
Marry a widow. Yeah.
Yes.
I understand. I understand that that's a theme in the era that you guys are working your way through.
Yes.
And there's a reason why, so this is part of that, that world that happens, that, ocean that, we're swimming in. So at this time, our country is not perfect. Still not perfect, was definitely not perfect, at the time. So, widows are in kind of a special position. White married women get a small boost during, revolutionary times for being a Republican mothers, or this concept of Republican motherhood. They're teaching their
Is it like
sons to be patriotic to the Republic.
it's like the
Basically,
Spartan mothers give birth to Spartan warriors.
raising
Yeah.
Spartans. Yes.
Yeah.
So we, and where that comes directly from a lot of the Enlightenment philosophy of the time. So it's interesting. So some women then also are in jobs that sort of set them apart. Women who are widowed, or women who are involved in tavern ownership, women who are, whose husbands are away at war, who are managing the estates, have a little bit more control if they're, taking money from lodgers and things like that. So there are some women who are more businessy-ish.
We saw a lot of that with Abigail, right? Because she, as John Adams is away, she was actually expanding the business, like selling things like apple butter, and
and
she had a real knack for the finances.
Yeah, and it starts to be a little bit muddy there. It starts out, some of the letters that go back and forth, it's my business becomes our business the more it gets discussed. And we'll talk about correspondence in a minute, because that's really important. But and then also, of course, your prostitutes, and also slave women. And there's sometimes not a very big distinction here. You will hear women that we think in the record being referred to as prostitutes, but we also hear, you see the name, and the name is associated with a slave. So that's kind of muddled. So those women have things a little bit different, but basically the only way we learn the name of a woman in this time period is if she's a widow of a wealthy man, she's married to a wealthy, powerful man, or she's the daughter of a wealthy and powerful man. So to keep that in mind too as we go through these.
Really? So like even some of like Sybil and her ride?
Sybil was the daughter of a famous general. So
you needed to have somebody famous around them to be
you needed to have a man in your life that was notable. People would be talking or writing about the man, and you would be a footnote in that.
Right.
So a lot of the women that we hear stories about, is really hard to verify what they did or didn't do, even if we hear their names, because this is the only time they pop up in this record. And this is why correspondence is the most important records that we have, because women don't appear in the public record hardly at all.
Martha.
Yeah. We'll never know. So women don't appear in the public record very well, but all of the business, the day-to-day business that was going on in homes that maybe used to happen at kitchen tables, is now being written down, and it's happening in letters. So we have this huge burst of letters. Families have all these letters from this time period where women are writing to their husbands who are on the front, or women are corresponding with other women, and all of these letters going back and forth. And as soon as the war ends, the letters stop, and the women disappear from history again.
Oh, that's disappointing.
It is disappointing. Well, they don't. The letters stop to be. They don't. They're not the letters that get saved any longer.
Oh,
so the letters that women were writing to each other were meaningless, frivolous. So even the wives who followed the Continental Army, they were called the necessary nuisance by the men in charge. These were the women who walked behind the army, washed their laundry, made their meals, presumably women
Told
who
them to
gave
change their
them
socks.
gave them
Pawn shop.
services both wifely and motherly, I would assume. And these camp women, they were considered a nuisance. Men just really treated women in a way that even the most misogynist and crappy guys that we know would probably still be appalled today by.
I know, right?
It's incredible. So we have come pretty far.
Are you ready
250
for that
years.
apology yet?
Yeah, start writing
I
that
feel like
letter,
Christopher
baby. Start
Titus.
writing that letter. So there's a couple of women who are writers and publishers too. So that is helpful. There's a Black enslaved woman named Phyllis Wheatley, and she was a very popular poet at the time.
Oh,
She
it's the
was,
poet, the one from before the Revolution.
yeah, she was.
Yeah.
She wrote. Her big famous one at the time was "To His Excellency General Washington," and she was considered a poetic genius. People knew her. This did not get her freedom,
Right.
or any other
You,
rights.
you don't free the goose that lays the golden egg.
Oh no, don't free it at all. So then there was Mary Otis Warren, and I'm not sure if you looked into her at all. She's a lot of fun. She wrote satirical plays, and did really took it bad to the British. Gave them really, she had nothing good to say. She's quite funny as well. And then after the Revolution, she writes a 3-volume history of the Revolution titled
So are these people writing under their own names, or are they writing
These
under
women were.
pseudonyms?
I didn't use any of the alleged women who had pseudonyms because I couldn't prove it.
Right.
Yeah, I know. We're big on that. So Mary Otis Warren writes History of the Rise, Progress, and Termination of the American Revolution. And then, of course, our hero, Mary Catherine Goddard, she is the printer who prints the first edition of the Declaration. And there's a big statue of her waving the Declaration over her head. It's a great statue. I love it.
I have some oil paintings by a Michael Goddard. I wonder if that's
maybe there's some relation there. Who knows? So then, another thing that women were doing at the time is they were supplying the Continental Army with stuff, not just following camp, but also within town. There were a lot of women who learned how to run forge and melted down metal that they could, pots and pans and whatever to make shot. It was a hugely important role.
We saw the little tools that they would use. It's
little pouring little tiny shot. Yeah.
Because they're melting stuff that would melt in your fireplace too. Like if you're just melting down pewter,
just anything they had,
right?
Yeah. The cups, the candles, candle holders, everything. And there's one account we do have, Mary Patton. She's I think in Georgia, and she is producing gunpowder. She's making it out of bat guano.
No kidding.
I didn't look up the chemistry. I failed organic chemistry. I had to take it twice in college. It's the reason I had a 3.7 instead of a 3.9.
Nitrite or niter, saltpeter, and what's the other one?
Bat guano.
I think that's where you get the niter from.
I know. I'm just saying. I don't know. I don't cop to that, but. And she supplied gunpowder to a militia called the Over Mountain Men, and they were able to sustain themselves the Battle of Kings Mountain because of her excellent chemistry skills. So I thought that was really cool.
Was it like a higher quality than its contemporaries? Because the gunpowder at this time is not that great. It's not I couldn't tell you. I mean, it worked, obviously. Right. So I couldn't tell you if it was better or if it was just the fact that they had a lot of it. Yeah, and maybe the British didn't have it. There was a woman, and her name might be in my notes somewhere. She had a bunch of gunpowder at her house. Her husband had a bunch of gunpowder at his house, and he was gone. He was important in the militia, and he was gone. And the British were on their way, and they were going to take her house and take her gunpowder, and she blew her own house up. Yeah.
So that's
the first punk rocker.
Well, Diogenes was the first punk rocker, but that is pretty punk rock.
Right.
So, that was, and that's another one, I put a little section in my notes, but some women did fight. And that's true. There was a woman who...
What was the one that I saw? Deborah Sampson. Is that the one?
She was a spy.
Deborah Sampson was when he disguised herself as Robert Shirtlift.
That was her brother's
17
name.
months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Rebecca
Impressive that she
Mott.
managed to get hurt and not reveal her gender still.
Well, she was hurt. Okay, so she was hurt twice.
Oh,
The first time she was hurt, she was shot in the leg and injured in the head. And she allowed the doctor to treat her head wound. And then when he went away to go get some tool or whatever to get the shot out of her leg, she crawled out of the tent and took off. And she took, allegedly, the story goes, she took the shot out of her leg herself, and the wound never healed properly.
Sounds like Dances with Wolves.
Very Dances with Wolves.
Right?
Yeah. It's like, we have all these ideas about what happened or what didn't. But then she was injured again, and the doctor who treated her kept her secret.
Yeah.
She said, "Don't tell," and he didn't. So I thought that was.
All men were.
I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool of him. He must have thought, she was doing a good job, brave.
Well, he probably saw her other scars and was like, you know what? I'm not going to mess with this woman.
Want to mess with this lady.
He's an officer, a non-combatant, and he's got a veteran in his. Yeah, like, you know what? I'll keep whatever secret you want. Just don't murder me.
Please don't shoot me in my sleep. So yeah, that's pretty funny. There was a good Nancy Hart, I think, was one that you would really like. She lived in the Georgia backcountry. She single-handedly captures 6 Tory soldiers who had invaded her home.
Yeah.
She kills one, wounds another, and holds the rest at gunpoint until her neighbors get there.
How long did that take?
I want to say like 3 days.
Oh my God. How do you keep people at gunpoint for 3 days?
Well, every once in a while you don't get to sleep. Every once in a while you scream and point the gun at them again.
And shoot one.
Well, I mean,
one was injured and one was killed.
She killed one and wounded one. Yeah. Well, and so this is cool. There was during the Civil War, there was an all-female militia in Georgia, and their militia name was the Nancy Harts.
Oh,
and
really?
they defended their town against the Union. And she was their honorary, their namesake. So then there were also the Minute Women of Pepperell, Massachusetts. And the men all left.
Back to Massachusetts.
Yep, everything goes back to Massachusetts. so the women went and got their muskets, and there's only one bridge into town over the Nashua River, and they successfully defended their bridge and ended up capturing 2 enemy spies. And those guys had a bunch of information that never made it back to the British. So they were pretty cool. They considered themselves a militia, and Pepperell was their town, and they were no British coming in here, which I thought was really awesome. And scout seems to be the most common position, scout or spy. So these were women who, especially I think Sybil would have fallen into this category. So Sybil Ludington's the daughter of a general. And the story is he told her to go ahead and do her ride. That he ordered her.
Oh, really?
That she didn't go on her own. She was used to this. He was telling her to do things all the time, and so you sneak around over there and tell me what you see, or go across town. Plus, I think maybe the British weren't hip to the idea that women were wandering around gathering information.
There's something messed up about putting your daughter in that kind of risk, though, too, isn't there?
I don't think so.
No, hey,
why?
Babe, go spy on those.
Would you do that?
Would you ask? If they get caught? I wouldn't ask my daughter to do that.
What about your son? Would you ask your son?
No.
No.
I'd do it myself.
I would. No, I'd send the kids. I'd send the kids. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we're just from different kinds of families. I don't know.
Send the kids to go steal for you.
I'm from a really risk-taking family, though.
Yeah.
So, and that's another thing I want to talk about real quick too. While we're talking about these women who just kind of appear to have spontaneously got up and fought, these weren't women who didn't know how to shoot. Okay.
Right.
Everybody.
If anybody's managing a homestead needs to know how to shoot.
Everybody back then knew how to manage a firearm, knew how to kill a large animal, how to defend themselves against both human animals and wild creatures of the wood. They were, so these women were capable. It isn't like, sometimes you see in television or plays, that at this time period, and it's very British courtly. Maybe a few women in the cities were like that, but most people who lived in this country in the colonies We're
I
pretty
picture more like the
tough.
Quakers, or like when you go
Yeah,
you see like how the Amish live today. Like that's how I
right. It's
picture it.
pretty tough. It was
Yeah.
pretty much how the Amish live today. Yeah, real tough. So, all of these women would have been maybe they didn't practice shooting a lot, but they all knew their way around a firearm.
Yeah.
And so like Sybil Ludington, who at 16 outdoes Paul Revere's rides 40 miles in a rainstorm, um, alerting everybody that the British are coming and mustering. She had gone out to gather her dad's militiamen. So,
Yeah.
that was a
She
big
rode all the way
deal.
through like New York, right?
Yeah.
Where did her
Yep.
ride start and end?
She goes all the way through Putnam County. I don't know. It ends
Putnam
in
County. Okay.
Connecticut. So I think that
Oh wow.
yeah, she may have stopped at Danbury. I can't remember where she started, but they're the Daughters of the American Revolution. Helped set up. There's a
I think it was a
scenic
trail
highway type.
reenactment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
scenic byway that you can follow along Sybil's journey, which is really cool. Um,
Yeah.
so I imagine she was probably pretty wild. I like it.
She wasn't riding side saddle, you don't think?
On the statue of her, it shows her riding side saddle.
Does it?
Yes, the
Of course
monument.
it does.
Of
does.
course it does, which I highly doubt.
She would probably have
My
wanted that.
suspicion is she was in men's clothes, riding a horse normal,
Oh,
like a way a normal person
right.
rides a horse if they're in a hurry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, there was another one, and I couldn't confirm this, so Eric can be mad at me, but um, I love this one, Susanna Balling, a 16-year-old in Virginia who, according to her family legend, overheard General Cornwallis's plans at her family's plantation and rode all night to warn the American forces at City Point. So I don't
How
know.
stupid were this? I mean, for real. Like they
And
did it to themselves.
The reason I liked this was because they had obviously openly spoken about their plans in front of a 16-year-old girl who,
Right.
from their perspective, it's like
Couldn't
talking in front of the
possibly
family
understand.
dog. The dog's never
Right.
going to give up the recipe for Bush's baked beans.
Right.
I mean,
I'm trying to
whatever.
reach a younger audience.
I'm sorry, but I love that dog.
I know.
Yeah, and then there was a lot of other stuff too that women did when they didn't have to fiercely defend their homes against the British. And one of the things was the thread thrift. I can't remember the term they used for it. They refused to buy anything from the British to outfit the militias. So the American women,
so they had to do it.
They were just cranking out clothing, making shirts, making socks. I mean, they just made because they realized early on, smart economists, home economists that they were, that buying anything from the British was also supporting the enemy.
Right.
They were giving money to the British government, who's paying these guys to wreck their towns. And it was like, well, we're not going to give them, sort of like not one cupcake at our bake sale. You're not going to get anything from us. And I really liked that. I liked that as much as I liked the smelting and,
well, it's not just, it's not just, they're doing everything they can, right? You're giving your physical labor to help with the war effort, but you're also using your economic power to help support the war effort. Like you're doing everything.
This war is all about economic power.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, men considered the business of politics to be, I think they referred to it pretty consistently as the most masculine of pursuits, like that women are incapable of having a political mindset or understanding the politic, which is obviously incorrect because the women immediately spring into action and are, more than happy to do tasks both at home and in the field. And I wish that there had been I just wish that they had been a little bit better respected. It's
wish that there would have been a little bit more effort in remembering the ladies, as John Adams was asked to do.
So It's particularly galling coming from our founders, many of whom relied so heavily and so completely on having educated and capable wives.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, like, that's why the widows who remarry lose their property or any little small rights around town that they had. I don't blame them for refusing to remarry. I don't blame them for that. Like, doing all this effort, women were, so not only were women tough back then and gun smart and capable, they were all educated. These were all educated women. The people who came here, the first couple generations of Americans, right, hugely educated. I mean, you got to wonder how some guy who owned a pub manages to write a treatise on democracy. You know, doesn't even have an education. Well, it's because his parents were so damn educated, you know. Tocqueville right. comes over here and says, I can't believe how smart these people are. The women were highly educated. So, you know, for all of the reliance that our founding fathers, you know, to just ignore the fact that they were so reliant. I don't know. It's galling coming from Adams, especially.
Right.
Out of all of them. I don't know.
Really going to make Eric mad.
You know what? Fight me, Eric.
Right.
It's going to be the Massachusetts versus feminism. It's going to be the next big fight we have on here. Listen, it's not my fault he went on vacation and left you here with me.
Right.
Like, you guys could have found someone else to do this.
I am glad to find anybody else who's willing to do the research that's required for any of these episodes.
So listen, and I want to talk about the research too. I particularly enjoyed this research. My master's background is in women. So, but this is not, you know, I'm a Neolithic pre-Columbian, you know, I'm like the Stone Age. That's like my focus. So this is really cool. I mean, and that's nice to see. Anybody who's got a women's studies master's background has taken all of the classes and read all the books. And like, I have not visited this topic for 20 years or more, 25 probably. It's probably been 25 years since I graduated from college. So this is just it's not part of my art practice. It's not part of my art history teaching practice, none of it. And I really enjoyed doing the research. I listened to some audiobooks. I had a long drive.
What was the one podcast you said you listened to?
This is my new favorite podcast.
Is it
no
really?
No offense.
None taken. We
have, and this is a big did you know for your audience, there's a National Constitution Center that is endowed by Congress, and it's a nonpartisan, you know, it's just Congress set it into motion some number of years ago, and there it is. And it is there to help the American people understand the founding of our country. They have offices somewhere and a library, and they have several podcasts, and they are called the National Constitution Center. And they have a We the People podcast, and they are doing a huge series for the 250th anniversary of the country. And the We the People podcast published on April 16th, so just 2 weeks ago, a really great roundtable of women of the revolution. And I was so excited and inspired to listen to the women who actually study this part of our history talk about the things that they knew and the women that they were excited about. And I was like, oh, I didn't know about her. And like, you know, there were some things I didn't know about Sybil. They talked about, you know, all kinds of cool stuff. And especially they really drove home. I wish I could remember the name of some of the speakers, the part about correspondence and how it moved the private family conversations into the public. And I thought, think about how important those letters between the Adamses were. That that's like a little window into how that was managed. And so, and I started going back to look and see, and all the information I had about Sybil all came from letters within the family to each other. And it's like, I was like, oh my gosh, it's all letters. It's all letters. This is so cool. So I listened to 3 or 4 more after I finished my notes on this, 3 or 4 more different topics on that podcast. I was like, this is so cool. So I don't know. I'm inspired.
We need to send them a request, see if we can make friends with them.
I think that would be great. Like, I'm stoked on American history again, which is really cool. And not just like the monuments and the art, which is kind of in in my world. But like I said, it was really awesome to do the research, and it's hard. Research is hard.
Yeah. Oh
Nobody
gosh,
wants
yeah.
to talk to you about what you're researching. Like, what you do all day to day, Ray? I'm like, well, I watched paint dry. And while that was happening, I listened to 3 hours of an audio book about, the American Revolution and how
Or
the women wove the clothes.
or I had to redo everything completely because one of my sources turned out to be a pedophile, and I don't want to quote him.
Yeah, that was really unfortunate.
I was being
We're only
hypothetical.
trying to tell the true stories today, right? That's and yes, that's really unfortunate. I did have a great,
Speaking of
yeah.
speaking of true stories, I noticed that Betsy Ross did not show up in here at any point. Is that just a myth then? The story that she made the American flag?
It is an unfortunate truth that Betsy Ross likely did not sew the flag.
Yeah, the little bit of
There's
research I
no
did, it sounded like
conversations about a flag being
right,
commissioned,
right.
and
And then
everybody's
like
kind of got their own flag. Yeah.
the timeline that they came up with too, that the family came up with, was like a year earlier than anything was ever actually created anyway, or a year later or something, right? Like the timelines that they gave didn't even match up.
Yeah.
And it's just coincidental too that it just happens to be when they're looking for stories around the 100-year anniversary of the country that the grandson comes up with a story for the first time.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate. I was bummed to hear that. I grew
I
up
know, right?
like, oh yeah, and so speaking of people who don't want to hear your research, I was speaking with a colleague of mine.
This
We're
is all
doing
Pluto's all over again.
Yeah, we're doing Pluto. We're doing a show together next month, and we were talking, and she's like, how's your research going? And I'm like, oh, good. I said, I was really devastated to find out that Betsy Ross didn't sew the American flag. I was in 5th grade, and we were doing our like 5th grade play and on the American Revolution, and somebody got to beat Betsy Ross sitting by a campfire sewing the stars
Right.
onto the. I mean, it was like, it's like it's a core childhood memory. And I was the narrator because I was the only 5th grader with any kind of a
So
public speaking capacity.
let me ask
And
you this question then.
everyone wanted to be Betsy Ross, and only one person could.
Was it a flex for the United States to have such a complex flag design?
I don't think it was a flex.
Or did they just not consider the what would take to actually like make one of these flags at the time?
They certainly knew what it would take. I don't think it was a flex, like in the sense that it was a flex on like the European
You're
countries whose
sewing
flags are all super
13
boring.
flags on. Well, I mean, yeah, because all you got to do is sew 3 pieces of fabric together and you're done.
But we were more than 3 pieces of country.
Yeah.
I think
but when you need to commission 1,000 of those flags, it might be seeing.
Well, just get your women to do it. They'll do anything.
Right.
They'll sew all night. They don't care.
What were you about to say?
I was going to say, I think it was more of a really trying to hold the 13 disparate cultures together by saying, like, each one of us is going to have a piece of this. I feel like it was a national unity issue. Yeah. I mean, the guys in the beginning were really big on that. They really wanted, and they really wanted everyone to feel like they had some skin in the game. And again, it's part of it is because we were so British, right?
Right.
It had to have something to do with that. And then because there's so many, there's so many of us, well, we need to have a star for everybody. We need to have a stripe for everybody. We need to, I don't think anybody planned ahead thinking about what happens if we decide to add more states, we have to add more stars. I feel like,
well, they originally tried to add more stripes too. And
that's just never going to work out. Yeah. Can you imagine?
It's funny though. You say that everyone gets a star. It's like everyone gets a trophy. Age started in 1777.
Everybody gets a trophy. Why not?
Everyone gets a star.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So who were some of your favorite women that you encountered?
Just from the little bit of research I did, one of my favorite ones I think was Margaret Corbin, and I don't know that we talked about her. Was she in your notes?
She was not in my notes. I chose women I think that you didn't put in your notes.
Okay. So I don't have a whole lot about her other than that she was just the first woman to receive a military pension. She was helping her husband during the battle for Fort Washington. He was manning a cannon, and then after he got killed in action, she actually continued firing his cannon on the British. And
I
then,
believe he was only injured. I think he may have
no, he
survived.
was. I thought he
Was he
was
killed?
killed.
Okay. I thought
Yeah,
he was only injured. Well,
I think that was
she
why she
was,
got the pension, is because of
well,
that.
yeah. I mean, what I meant was I know he died. I thought he died after. I didn't know he died right there.
Oh,
Um,
they didn't. I guess maybe it didn't say. Yeah, maybe
she
it.
was, she was actually the original Molly pitcher.
Yeah.
So she wasn't actually firing the cannon at the get out.
Mm-hmm.
She was bringing water to the guys who were firing the cannons,
Right.
because it's a
Right.
disgusting, hot, and horrible job. If you've ever
Yep.
been to any of the reenactments, really bad job. So yeah, she was the original Molly pitcher, which is cool. She was also in the fifth grade play.
And your play? Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
it was they. There are a lot of girls in my school. Not a lot of jobs for the girls to do in the American Revolution play. So a lot of the girls were dressed up as boys with their powdered wigs on and their little red coats,
Right.
kind of a mess.
Men's business, but yet everyone's wearing wigs. It's always
And
weird.
high-heeled shoes.
Uh,
It's funny how trends change, isn't it? And hose.
yeah.
Women went
Yeah.
bare-legged and men wore hose. And now it's also the opposite. Pink and blue is another one that I love.
Pink and blue.
Pink used to be the color for boys.
Oh, they
Because it's
switched?
a less saturated version of red, and red is considered the most masculine, and blue is considered soft and weak and feminine. So
Huh.
pink, boys used to wear pink and girls used to wear blue. And somewhere that got flippy
I got
floppied.
flip-flop.
Just to know more proof about how
Hmm.
arbitrary all of this is.
I know, right? Esther Reed, did you come across her at all?
I did not. Tell me about her.
I only have a little bit, just a blurb about her organizing the largest women's organization of the Revolution. So she led a bunch of efforts to like raise funds and create supplies for soldiers.
Nice. Community organizing.
Right. So kind
I
of like
dig it.
who was the one who was like the founder of the Red Cross? What was her name? So kind of, it sounded like it was similar to like
I am
that.
blanking on that as well, but yes, I know who you're talking
Right.
about. That's like so she was kind of like the first daughter of the American Revolution, right?
Something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that. I mean, she probably was probably not the same organization, but very cool anyways.
And then was Lydia Darragh, was that the one that you mentioned about the British officers meeting in her home, or was this another one?
No, that was another one. That
Okay,
was
so there's a few of these
Susie
then.
Ballard.
Susie Ballard. Okay, yeah.
Susie Balling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems like this happens quite a bit then, where British officers met in their homes, and then the women would just gather intelligence.
This is the question about the spies being women too. There's
Right.
I don't want to talk about it too much because it's really complicated and there's a whole secret code. But for anyone who's interested, the Culper spy ring was huge in New York, and
yeah,
they use numbers for common words. So the number 355 was lady. So there would be correspondence going back and forth. Number 355 is wherever, and there's the theory about who she is, but nobody can really prove it. It's like a whole mystery. It's kind of cool. It's like a history's mysteries. It's neat to read about. It was just a lot. It was way too much to include all of it here. But the general idea, yeah, the general idea was that women were constantly like walking in and out of rooms in taverns and handing people food and like doing, and it's like, well, we'll just recruit some of them to like write down what they hear, and it'll be a really great source of information. And it does appear that the arrogance, the common theme here is the arrogance of the occupying military force.
How does nobody realize that all your secrets are being leaked whenever these people come in and serve you food?
Several women that were involved in the Culper spy ring ended up on a prison boat and did die.
They did actually catch some of them.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
Some women were arrested. One of them died on the boat.
Any attempts made to negotiate their release or anything?
No.
Didn't even acknowledge their
existence. Washington later complains that the Culper ring isn't any good anymore.
Oh.
A bunch of them got rounded up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, what are you going to do? You're not going to go and plead with the enemy. You're going to hope that your spies just don't tell anything. You know, it's
Right.
kind of the deal, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I mean, when the war's over, you should try to get him back at least.
Yeah, I don't think they made it.
Yeah.
The prison ships that the British were using for like political prisoners at the time, they didn't. People had to bring food to them in the hopes
Oh,
that the jailers would give the food to the prisoners who were family members of theirs, or it got dark fast.
yeah.
It got dark fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, the point
What
was to kill them without having to do any kind of a trial, quietly, and apparently a
Yeah.
prison
Yeah. Yeah.
vote
Yeah.
was the way to do it. So
If you could just forget about him over there, then maybe
yeah,
the
and just
problem
let them
goes
die
away if you don't
slowly.
feed it. Yeah.
Yeah, don't give it any
Do you have a
water or
happier note
sunlight.
to end us on by any
I
chance?
do not have a happier note to end us on. I
Nancy
wish I
Hart, who
did.
held some loyalists at home at gunpoint in her own home.
She's good. She was very renowned in her community as a permanent fixture. So
Yeah.
she became the namesake there of
The
there was
militia
a
movement or
women's
something.
militia during the Civil War. They called themselves the Nancy
Yeah.
Harts, which is awesome.
Like we actually just, yeah.
So yeah, that was so, backwoods. And this was another thing. It's really weird that I heard, and I want to say that it was from the National Constitution Center, that the further into the backwoods you got, the more likely the people were to be British supporters, which I thought was interesting. We don't know anything about any of those women because obviously we're not going to talk about their heroics, but
side,
certainly
yeah.
they were doing the same for their side, I would guess.
Yeah. Yeah, but they were on the wrong side.
They were on the wrong side. The idea being that the mountain people, who've been like the foothills people back then,
The
they
Appalachian.
didn't like the government, and the government, from their perspective, and I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong, was the guys who formed the Continental Congress. They were the governors and the mayors and the big city men, and they had a distrust of those guys already. And they're like, well,
Right.
I'm not siding with them. Why should I take a chance?
Changed much, have they?
No.
Okay.
No.
Sounds familiar.
It should.
And this is why we study history.
It is why we study history. And so I thought it was really interesting. I had never heard that before. I know almost nothing about Americans who would have supported staying. The assumption I operated on my whole life is that probably half the people wanted to stay British. They just got beat up by the other half that wanted to leave, and that was that. And it hadn't occurred to me that
or do you think it was more like it is today, where you're like a 10% majority on either side and then 80% that's just trying to live their life?
That's just like, I'm just going to hide in my basement when it blows through town.
Tell me who to pay the taxes to, and let me get on
tell
with
me
things.
where to send the check. I want to render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, and then move on with my day. Yeah, absolutely. But some of the I was surprised Nancy, specifically because of where she lived, was on the Revolution side and not on the British side. So that was interesting to me.
Right.
I definitely am sad. I'm sure there were a lot more women. There were several women who disguised themselves, that were known to have disguised themselves as men to go fight. For various reasons, I'm sure. Maybe some women are just wild and they just want to be involved in the dangerous thing. Yeah. There's a certain percentage of daredevils out there.
Yeah, always has been.
Yep. And so, they did or didn't receive pensions about at the same rate, it seemed, and what I was able to research, that as men did, which was a problem. The government, when it forms, kind of views service in the Continental Army as having been like, well, that was your business. Talk to your local militia leader about that, I guess. Not a great way to do things. Yeah, no real plan. They didn't seem to have a real plan for that. And, maybe it's because the British I don't know how that works with the British. I don't know how their army is set up. Do they have a robust system for
their whole
retirement?
Officer class is all aristocratic too, though.
So they don't need a
trying
pension.
to get away from that. Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we didn't have a good model to work on it. That'd be another interesting side quest if you wanted to stay in the Revolutionary era. Like, what did we keep from the British military versus what did we reject when we,
Oh yeah,
you know,
there's a lot that we kept,
there's a
at
lot.
least
There's
as
a lot
far
you
as
could
like the
go over
Navy
there.
goes.
Yeah, for sure. For
But no, I
sure.
think our
So
next side quest is going to be Gouverneur Morris. I have just started doing my deep dive into him, and this one's going to be a lot of fun.
I knew who he was, but I didn't. He wrote the
There's
preamble.
there's so much more to him too. He's one of the
And
few that signed every like major piece
yeah,
of the was
I,
it like the Declaration, the Continental
yeah, he
Congress,
signed it
Articles of
all.
Confederation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he signed all of it. And he wrote the preamble. And
I didn't know he wrote
he's
the
a name.
preamble. That's wild.
I think he wrote the preamble. I think Franklin might have edited it for him, but pretty sure he wrote
Right.
it. He was like this guy who did all kinds of stuff,
Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. So please join me in thanking Ray for doing all this amazing research for this episode. And if there are any great stories that we missed, you can let us know either in the comments or by email at buckstartsherepodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you all in the next episode.
Bye.
Produced by China Shop Productions.